Well, hi, this is Pete, and today I'm with Steve Clarke. Now, Steve is someone who has an amazing story. He doesn't have, by his own admission, any formal business education, no MBA or higher qualifications to run businesses, but that's not stopped him starting a business and growing it to well over £30 million in turnover. And what I've asked Steve to do today, and he's graciously accepted the invitation, is to share with us how we can take our companies over that sort of magical £1 million turnover mark. Many of the people that I speak to are sort of stuck at that sort of glass ceiling almost and need to know how to break through it. So without further ado, let me introduce Steve. And Steve, thanks for joining us today and sharing some tips.
You're welcome, Pete. Good to talk to you.
So just going back to your background for a moment, perhaps you can just tell us very briefly what the sort of story is behind starting with nothing and making something which is so enormous.
A fair size, I guess, not quite enormous. When you look at what people are doing with Facebook and things now, in no time at all, there's always a bigger game that comes to town. But yeah, build a good business. As you said, I don't have an education. But what I discovered, essentially, was sales at the age of 18. And when I discovered the world of sales and that to sell things, all you could do is solve problems for people, I started finding people with bigger problems and solve bigger problems for them, and they bought more. It was really as simple as that, is that I realised there was no secret to sales, but being able to get on with people. So my background really, Pete, is all about sales and marketing. I'm not a man that works through spreadsheets effectively, but I've learned to solve problems for people. That's where the sales came in, and that's where the growth come from.
I really like this way that you framed the sales process as solving problems, because I think one thing that holds a lot of people who are in smaller businesses back is a kind of almost allergy to the word sales. They think that selling is forcing people to buy stuff that they don't want, and that doesn't work, does it?
No, it's so kind of 70s, 80s. If you look at the evolution of salespeople, as it were, people do definitely have an image in their mind of who someone is if they say they're in sales. It's the kind of maybe the double glazing guy, the foot in the door. In days gone by, the salesperson was meant to be kind of jovial and a bit of a comedian, and it would all be done on a kind of a social side, and eventually they'd take an order. People would get to like them. But the way that the world has changed so dramatically over recent years, it's now, if you're good or bad, that's amplified. And so people are looking for innovation, they're looking for sincerity, they're looking for passion in people. And really that comes from solving problems for people. And it's not, if you've got a good product or service, it's incumbent on you to tell people that you've got it for them. So once you find the right people and let them see you've got a solution, and you've got something that solves a problem, they will come and buy.
So it's as true today as it's ever been that people buy from people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I still believe that's right. I can't think, can you, of the last time you actually went out and bought something for someone you didn't like. If they wind you up the wrong way, I know you're like me on this, Pete, is you would do everything not to go and buy that product, no matter how much you want it, if the person rubs you up the wrong way.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's still very important.
Yeah.
Very important.
Okay, so we've got the emphasis on sales, and I guess the product or the service doesn't really matter here. It's the same principle that we're connecting with people and we're solving problems.
Yeah.
But how do you get an organization structure behind you that's scalable and doesn't break? Because presumably once you start to make good sales, you need people, you need a team, and you need systems behind you to support that effort.
Yeah, I think the thing with that is there is no surefire way to success in business. We know that and accept it. People talk about the success formula. It can help for sure, but business for me is like a game of snakes and ladders. Avoid the snakes, grab the ladders when you can, and make sure you're heading in the right direction. But for me, the single thing that still I find extraordinary with business people that I meet day in, day out, is that so many of them just rock up in the morning, pour a cup of coffee, fire up the laptop, and start answering emails. They actually haven't got any plan at all of where they're trying to go. They don't have, they will, if they're coming to visit me at my office, they will ask for a postcode, they'll put it into the sat nav, they'll check they've got fuel in the car, they'll get a direction heading on where they're going, and then they'll get to their destination. And yet in business, if I ask to see the plan of where they're going and what the growth plans look like, they haven't mapped it out at all. And I find that astonishing. I know you must come across that too with people you talk to.
I come across a lot of people who not only do they not know where they're going, if you ask them how much they sold last year, they don't know where they've been either.
Yeah, correct. This week, last week, the month before, it's all about being able to test and measure activity. And not everything's going to work, but you need to know what you've done, what the actions have been, what the results have been, and the outcomes. And the things that work, turn up the heat on those. The things that don't, turn them off quick. The biggest thing, you asked me about, what gets people over this £1 million mark. The first thing is to have a vision, is to have a focus on what you're looking to try and achieve, and an action plan. But coupled with that, what took us, we were, in the last company, again, I've had several companies, Peter, and I've started them, merged them, floated one on the stock exchange in the States. But the last business, the UK one, we got that to 30 million a year in annual revenues and good profits to match as well, by the way. But we did that by the one word that gets overused, by niching the business. Because we were essentially a kind of a knacker's yard for computers. We were stripping computers down to spare parts and selling the parts back to the trade. Anyone that needed the parts, we'd have them available. We'd get them shipped by courier tomorrow morning to Edinburgh to give you the spare part for your repair team. So it wasn't a very sexy business. But when we actually found a niche that we could work in, we experienced something which is really nice in business called step growth. Because we went through that £1 million mark very quickly to the 2 million, to the 3 million. And it was because we niched our proposition and we didn't get dragged off course by every single possible sales opportunity, and we weren't slugging it out in the trenches with everyone trying to sell computers. We found ourselves a very specific niche and became the expert and the owner of that niche.
Okay, for the benefit of people who may be hearing the word niche in a business context for the first time, what would you define as a niche?
Okay, well, if I use that one as an example, but let me take it back actually, because when I was a young salesperson, I discovered then how important niching was. We were selling, this is how old I am now, Pete, we were selling memory typewriters, a Hermes Toptronic 51. It had a little display on the front of the typewriter, and you could commit small amounts of information to memory and center things up. It was like a magical machine, but it was £2,500 a time. But I discovered that because of the centering and because of the way it worked, this machine would solve so many problems for very smart kind of boutique-y and upmarket hotels, because they could present their menus in a really beautiful fashion. And so I went into that niche and started supplying those typewriters to every privately owned hotel for miles and miles around, because I became an expert by using their language. Because at 18 I discovered there was a thing called a table d'hôte menu and an a la carte menu, and I learned a few terms. The maitre d' is the person I went to because he's the one that wanted to know how to produce these menus beautifully in no time at all. And I sold more of those Hermes Toptronic 51 typewriters than anyone else in the country, because I'd niched it. So all I did was I took that typewriter and sold it right the way through to hotels for a specific purpose. Could that typewriter
work?
Try
and please everybody.
Correct.
Okay.
I could have taken it to solicitors, accountants, and every industry, and all they would say to me is, "How much is that then?" £2,500. Oof, can't afford that. Whereas I was solving a problem for the hotel industry with this typewriter, and in fact, when they said how much it was £6 a week, because I'd worked out I could lease it to them rather than sell it to them to save their cash flow. So I really got into that niche and sold them to everyone. Once I sold to all the people I could, then I went and did the same thing with the building trade and the same thing with solicitors. But I worked on that tight niche, that group of people that had a problem. So with my computer business, we uncovered a niche, which was that if you had an insurance claim, you dropped your laptop, for example, you would go to Churchill Insurance and they would get a couple of quotes and they would just settle for the cheapest quote they could. But I realised that they were being taken apart because, in fact, I could repair some of the machines or I could replace it, whichever was required. And so I went to an insurance company with this basic proposition because I knew that their claims handlers were taking up huge amounts of time because people were trying to make a claim for, at that time, a Pentium 4 when they had a 486 computer. So they were paying out more than they should do, and insurance companies were wasting lots of their time in their claims departments and paying out too much money. So I stepped in and offered to solve that problem for them, which meant that we could collect your damaged machine, we could inspect it, repair it or replace it, and then help the client. So we became an outsourced call centre, really, for the insurance industry.
So it really is down to problem solving and niching at the end of the day. Irrespective of which industry you're in, you could see parallels here, couldn't you?
Absolutely. But then couple that Pete, with having the focus, which was we wanted to be the number one player in our market that could look after insurance claims that were IT related. Within a year or two, we started thinking, well, we could do this with brown goods and white goods, like the fridge freezers and furniture, but that would have distracted our attention from what we were the best at. So what happened is the next thing that we did is we hired in a skill set that we didn't have within the team, because someone had to work with the operational side really, really well, because we got to a point where we had 150 staff, we were handling several thousand claims a month, and we needed someone to really run the business from an operational standpoint. And a problem that a lot of people have is not recognising that you can hire people in that are better than you that will actually help grow the business. So it went from the 5 or 6 million to the 30 million very quickly. But that's because we hired in a chief executive who had always been on a really big pay packet somewhere else but didn't own a piece of equity. And we decided, okay, if we were to give away a little piece of the sweet equity to someone that could earn into this and turn the business from 3 or 4 into 30 or 40 million, then he will have earned his place, and he did.
And that's always a difficult jump, isn't it, for people who are used to running their own business and working in the business, is to realise that actually you might be the very thing that's holding the business back, even though you were the one that started it.
Correct. People get very precious about being the only person that can do it because of their skill set, and realistically, in business, your job is to get to a point where you could make yourself redundant. But people start to feel scared about that. They feel vulnerable. Certainly, even when we brought our chief executive in, and he didn't really meet with me for the first couple of months, I was feeling that maybe he was trying to get me out of my own business. In fact, when we sat down and had a conversation about it, I said, no, Steve, you've got the sales side worked out. I need to focus my attention over here. Yours is all working beautifully. And we're still very, very good friends to this day. He was a genius. And what happened is, you just touched on the phrase, too many people end up working in their business, not on it.
Yeah,
and it's when
which makes it hard to sell it, of course, as well, doesn't it?
Well, it makes it impossible. If people are building a business with an exit in mind, and we did, from when we hit the first kind of £2 million pounds a year in turnover, we then started setting our sights on what the exit would look like, and we built that for sale. Just as you would build a product or a service for sale, we started building and shaping our business to put it on the block for sale. There was always a clear focus, clear direction, and we had a plan, and we followed the plan. We didn't deviate, because, as you know, lots of things come across your desk every day, and there's new shiny pennies to go chasing. But if you don't have a focus on and look on where you're trying to go and measure it against that map, you get distracted too easily.
There's that old cliche, isn't it? Not have a plan, you've got a plan to fail, or something similar.
Fail to plan to fail. But it is so true. Lots of these sayings absolutely are true.
Well, we've been on the phone now for much longer than I'd planned. Doesn't mean we've failed. I mean, to be honest, I could sit here and chat all day. But I do really need to wrap it up. And I'm sure people will want to know more about how they can connect with you, because I understand that having done all this amazing stuff, you're now sort of giving back to the business community by being a sales mentor and traveling all over the place and speaking and writing books and sort of sharing that knowledge in other ways. So how can people connect with you, Steve?
In all the social media places, I guess the best place is to go to my website, to Eureka Sales, EUREKASALES, eurekasales.co.uk, and on there are all the links to me on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all those good things as well.
That's brilliant, and I'll make sure that I mention those that link in your social media stuff in the stuff that goes with the video. But Steve, thanks so much. You've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure other people will take a great deal away from this. I just want to thank you for your time, and let's catch up next time you're in London and do a bit more of this over a beer.
Yeah, perfect. Very welcome. Cheers, Pete.
Thanks.